This is a lecture from Open Tuition. For the free lecture notes that go with this podcast, please visit opentuition.com. This is question 3 from the December 2008 paper F5 exam. So make sure you've got the question in front of you, either from a revision kit or download it from the ACCA website. It's question 3, Henry Company. So let's have a look. Always have a quick look at the requirements first. You can do this during your 50-minute reading time. But part A says, describe 5 factors other than the cost of labour and overheads mentioned above that HC should take into consideration in calculating its bid. Part B, calculate the total cost that it can use as basis of a bid. And so let's have a look back and see what's happening. Henry Company provides skilled labour to the building trade. They've recently been asked by a builder to bid for a kitchen fitting contract for a new development of 600 identical apartments. We've not worked for this builder before. There's cost information as follows. So, we'd already looked at the requirements. We're doing this bid to fit kitchens. We're providing labour, so we're not providing kitchens, we're just fitting them. There's cost information for the contract, but at a very quick look, the second paragraph says labour, and you'll have noticed there's mention of learning rates. There's obviously learning curves involved. And the third paragraph says overheads. So they've given us cost information, which clearly we're going to have to look at, but part A doesn't require any numbers at all. It says describe 5 factors that we should take into consideration in calculating the bid. So let's have a think. It wants 5, 10 marks, so 2 marks each. And let's see how many we can think of. In the exam, don't waste too much time, but there is a temptation always to get straight into the numbers. You must write something, and although it's hard to think of 5 factors straight away, you should be able to think of 2 or 3 reasonably quickly. And if you can think of 3 reasonable factors, you're getting 6 marks. You've passed section A. You've got to make sure you do everything you can to get half marks on every part. So let's have a think. And in one sense, there's a problem because we're just fitting these kitchens. It tells us detailed information for labour and overheads, but he doesn't want us to talk about them. He wants 5 other factors. Well, 2 of them, the examiner has almost given you. The examiner doesn't waste words, and look at that first paragraph. We provide skilled labour to the building trade. We've recently been asked by a builder to bid for this contract. So surely one factor we're going to have to take into account is the competition. Other people will be bidding. Now the question does say describe, not list, so just writing one word is no good for 2 marks. But he's not wanting a long explanation. Why are we interested in competition? We need to consider what prices are likely to be quoted by other bidders. Because obviously if we want to win the contract, we need either to be cheaper or alternatively, of course, we need to convince the builder that HC is better quality. And there we are, 2 marks. I've probably actually written too much there. But as long as you've got 1 or 2 lines, not just a list. But I said the examiner's given us 2 bits to this answer because Look at the end of the second line. It also says HC has not worked for this builder before. Well, if we've never done any work before, surely one possibility which is worth thinking of is that if we win this contract and we do a good job, we might get more work in the future. And so there's a second point we need to take into account, future work. That make it clear what we mean, as I just said. If HC wins this contract and does a good job, then they might get more work from the same builder. So there's 2 points which come straight from the question. Again, the examiner, they never waste the time writing irrelevant information. The fact we've not worked for this builder before was there for a reason. Anything else? Of course, we need to take into account all costs. There's labour and overheads, but are there any other costs? Now, it's very tempting to mention materials. Usually, when you're doing a contract, you've got labour, you've got overheads, but you've got materials. Here, it's not directly relevant because all we're doing is fitting kitchens. There's no mention of us actually making them. But there could be other costs which aren't mentioned here. 2 in particular, and each of them is worth marks. It's 2 separate points. One is, if we're providing workers, and the next paragraph gives information, $24 an hour, $15 an hour, whatever it is, maybe we need supervisors. So what about the cost of supervisors? To supervise the workers. Now, it's not mentioned in the rest of the question. There might not be any need for supervisors, but we'd need to think about it. Another point, and a separate point, it may be that although we don't need the actual materials to build the kitchens, maybe the workers need extra special tools or something. So the cost of any special tools needed. Now, as I say, the examiner gave credit for those as separate points, so we've got 4 points here. We're not far off getting full marks. 2 other things that you could mention, well, perhaps more, but we only need 5, remember. But one thing certainly worth mentioning is, even though we've yet to look at all the numbers here, the calculations, inevitably any costs we've got are only estimates. And of course, that's always a danger. That however well we estimate, the actual costs may turn out to be higher, and we don't want to lose money. And so maybe we need to build into our costings perhaps an extra amount to be safe. Now, if you look back, I've now got 5 points. I've got my 10 marks. I'm not going to waste time. Check the examiner's answer. The examiner mentioned another point, which is a nice one. How certain are we to get paid about this contractor? Do we know how good a payer he is? Is there any risk of getting paid late or not getting paid? Because again, if you thought, or if we thought that there was a risk involved, maybe again we should put extra costs into our contract. Anyway, that's more than enough for part A. I said earlier, if you've only thought of 2-3 points, fine. Don't waste too much time, but leave the rest of the page blank. Go to a new page and see what we can do on part B. If you think of more later for part A, you can come back and add it. But part B actually says calculate. Calculate the total cost that's a basis for the bid. So now let's look at the cost information in detail. The second paragraph, there's labour. Labour for the contract is available. We expect the first kitchen will take 24 hours, but thereafter it'll be subject to a 95% learning rate. After 200 kitchens are fitted, the learning rate will stop, and the time taken for the 200th will be the time taken for all the remaining kitchens. So let's set it up, and you should be used to this. There have been several questions of a similar idea. We need the labour. I'm just going to look at labour for the moment, but we need the labour cost for 600 kitchens. Now I'm going to do all my workings in hours. You can do it in hours, you can do it in dollars. I'm going to do it in hours, because if we can work out how many hours it'll take, it'll be easy to cost it, because at the end of the paragraph it says labour costs $15 an hour. So I need to know how long it'll take to make 600. Well, as I say, you should have seen ones like this before. That for the first 200, we've got learning. So the total time for 600, we're going to have to work out the time for the first 200. That's standard learning. In a minute we'll use the formula. But the next 400, it says once we've made 200, they'll all take the same time as for the 200th kitchen. So if we can work out how long the 200th takes, maybe it takes 10 hours or something, well, the next 400, it'll be 400 times the time for the 200th. So we're going to have to do it in 2 bits. How long does the first 200 take? How long does number 200 take? Well, let's apply the learning. Let's work out the time for 200. I'll say I'm going to work in hours. I'll cost out at the end. Well, remember, learning will never give you the time directly, but what it'll give you is the average time. To make 200, it'll be 200 times the average time per unit. And how do we get the average time per unit? Well, here's where we can use the formula. The average time is y is ax to the power b. It's on the formula sheet and it was typed on the question as well. A is the time for the first unit. It's 24 hours. X is the number of units. We're looking at 200 for the moment. To the power b, you're told b is minus 0.074. Now, if you've forgotten how to do that on your calculator, or you have problems, go to the lecture on the website on learning curves and check which buttons to press. But if you check with me, 200 to the power 0.074 negative equals, well, it's 24 times, it's 0.67565, but don't waste time writing it all down. Keep it in your calculator. And if you multiply by 24, it comes to 16.216. Now you may remember in any learning curve question there's a bit of rounding. I'm not worried. You won't lose marks for bits of rounding. But there's the average time. Well, 200 units multiplied by the average time. And it means the total time for the first 200 is 3243.2 hours. So we've got the first bit of what we need. To finish it though, I need to know how long number 200 takes. Well, we know how long 200 take. If we can work out how long 199 take, well, the time for 200 will be the difference between the two. So let's do it for 199. It'll be 199 times the average time again. And the average time, if we make 199, (24) for the first, 199 units this time to the power minus 0.074. And this time I'm going to do it all on my calculator. 199 to the power 0.074 negative equals, it's 0.6759. But if I multiply by 24, I get this time 16.222 hours. And so the total time for 199 times the average. I'm going to be even more precise. I left it in my calculator. It comes to 3228.1. Why did I do that? Because we know how long 200 took, we know how long 199 took, and so the time for the 200th is the difference. 200 in total with 3243.2, 199 in total 3228.1, and so the time for number 200 is 15.1 hours. And now I can go back to where we started. The time for 600, it was the time for the first 200. Well, we know that. Sorry, going up and down, but 3243.2 the next 400 well, 400 times the time for each one, which was 15.1, is what? 6,040. So the total time for 600 9283.2 hours. Great. Well, that's how long it takes. So now let's set up our costings. Contract costings. Let's set it up and immediately get some marks, because labour, we know how many hours, 9283.2. The cost per hour, the end of the second paragraph, it's $15, which means the total labour cost, 139,248. So, we've got that. However, we're not there yet because there are overheads. And the next paragraph, it says overheads are absorbed on a labour hour basis. Now that's good, because we know how many hours there are. So we're going to add on the overheads but it'll be on an hourly rate. However, he hasn't given us the hourly rate, but he said HC has collected overhead information for the last 4 months, and this is shown below. So for each of 4 months there, we know the hours worked, we know the overhead costs. We normally work 120,000 hours a year. We use the high-low method to analyse overheads. So I'll leave some space, come back and finish the costing off shortly, but let's do our overhead workings. Now it's the high-low method, which again has been fairly popular and something that should, I hope, be fairly automatic. For high-low, however many months we've got, we simply take the highest and lowest month in terms of the level of activity. So what I mean is, the activity here are the hours worked, and we're given the total cost. The highest hours worked is, which one? Month 4. In month 4 we worked 9,600 hours, and the cost was 116,800. The lowest month is which? Month 2. And in month 2 we worked 9,200 hours, and it was 113,600. Now remember, the only reason the overheads will change, part of it's going to be fixed overheads, and they by definition will be the same each month. But the reason it changes, it's the variable overheads, that more hours, there'll be more variable overheads. And so the difference in cost of 3,200, that must be the extra variable cost for the extra units, or hours, I do beg your pardon. I say again, the only reason the total cost will change is the variable cost of the extra hours. And so the variable overhead per hour $3,200, 400 hours, it's $8. Well, that was easy enough, and I can immediately go back to my costings because we now know the variable overheads. It's $8 an hour. Well, we know how many hours. And incidentally, even if you'd got those hours wrong for any reason, you'd still get full marks for using your hours for overheads, $8. So 9283.2 at $8 is 74,266. However, we're not quite there, because although we've dealt with the variable overheads, what about fixed? Because they're absorbed on a labour hour basis. So let's go back to the fixed overheads. To get the fixed overheads, well, go to either the high or the low. I'll go to the high month. We know what the total overheads were. 116,800. We know what the variable is now. There were 9,600 hours. It's $8 an hour. A total of 76,800. Well, if that's the variable, surely what's left must be the fixed overheads per month. We, though, want an hourly rate. We're absorbing on labour hours. And we always absorb over the average, the expected rate of work. It says we normally work 120,000 hours a year. So the normal hours per month, 120,000 a year, 12 months, it's 10,000 hours per month. And so the absorption rate, 40,000, 10,000 hours, $4 per hour. And now we can finish our costings. Again, it's now easy because we know the hours, and at $4, the fixed overheads $9283.2 at $4 is 37,133, giving a total cost $250,647. Now, I better mention, you will notice, if later you look at the examiner's answer, that there it's slightly different. It's 1,000 different. However, that's purely due to rounding. I've rounded slightly more than the examiner, and that would not lose any marks at all. That would be full marks for Part B. Finally, though, don't forget there's a Part C. And don't leave it. It may only be 2 marks. For that reason, don't obviously spend too long. But not to get one of the marks would be awful. And remember, if you can get half the marks on each part of the question, you're passing. You know, I've got Part B right in the middle of an exam. Clearly, I could have made errors. I may not get full marks in the exam, but my workings are clear enough. Even if I'd got the wrong answer, I'd certainly have got far more than half marks, proving I know what I'm doing. Finally, though, Part C. If the second kitchen alone is expected to take 21.6 man-hours to fit, demonstrate how the learning rate at 95% has been calculated. The first one took 24 hours, remember. They're now saying if the second is 21.6, demonstrate how it's been calculated. Well, remember how learning works, that although in Part B we had to use the formula with no choice, the basic learning rule, and there'd be 1 mark for stating this, is that if we double the production, the average time per unit falls to a fixed percentage of the previous average time. Now, you don't need to write that to get the marks, but if that's all you did, you'd get 1 mark. The important thing for the illustration is that it's dealing with the average time. And what's happening here? The first unit, how long did it take? It took 24 hours, and so the average time per unit clearly is 24 hours. We made a second unit, so we've doubled production and we've made 2. The second unit, it said, took 21.6 hours. So the total time for 2 is 45.6. And so what's the average time? Well, the average time, 45.6 for 2 units, gives us 22.8 hours. And it's the average time that falls by the fixed percentage. And what is the percent? The new average as a percent of the old average. 22.8 divided by 24. It's 95%. And there, of course, is the learning rate. And there we are.